"I'll give you my land if you give me a child," said the millionaire Apache to a poor, lonely widow, and what she did shocked the whole town. Before we begin the story, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from. And don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10 at the end. Enjoy the story. "Look, Mr. Crowley, I've already sold everything I could. All that's left in my house is dust, bills to pay, and my pig Winston. Can't you give me just a little more time?" The bank manager let out a deep sigh. For the fourth time. "Mrs. Carter, you've already had 3 extensions, but in my defense, I only used 2 of them responsibly. The third was because the kitchen roof fell right on my head, and I thought I deserved a little emotional break." Crowley adjusted his glasses with the kind of patience that made it clear he really wanted a kick-out client button on his desk. "The rule is simple. If the debt isn't paid within 30 days, the property goes to auction." Evelyn swallowed hard. 30 days? 30 days. In 30 days, not even a cactus blooms. Do you expect me to bloom money out here in the middle of the desert? The manager cleared his throat, growing impatient. She tilted her head, a bit more bold. "Tell me, Mr. Crowley, doesn't the bank have a heart? Not even a tiny piece, hidden in a vault somewhere next to the gold bars?" "Don't joke about that, Mrs. Carter. This is not a laughing matter. Look, I know the bank is a business, not a charity. But you have a heart, don't you? This house is all I have left of Harold." But it didn't matter. The papers in front of her were cold as stone. The signatures were already there, like dried wounds. The final deadline was written in bold. 30 days. "Money or the house key, Mrs. Carter?" Evelyn stood up slowly, straightened her skirt, and looked him straight in the eye. "Well, just so you know, Mr. Crowley, when I get rich, and I will, even if I have to win the church ladies' bingo, I'm going to buy this bank. And the first thing I'll do is fix this lobby because it's just plain ugly." She walked out like she was about to storm Normandy, ignoring the other customers' looks and the manager's voice calling behind her. 30 days, Mrs. Carter, not one more. Outside. Evelyn crossed her arms, took a deep breath, and mumbled, "All right, let's see. I've got a house falling apart, a stove that only works if you hit it with a wooden spoon, a pig who thinks he's a dog, and now a 30-day deadline before I'm sleeping on the street. Wonderful." She walked quickly across the town square, her heart racing and her head spinning. As she passed by the barber shop, 2 men were talking in low voices, not low enough to escape Evelyn's sharp ears. "They say that Apache up in the hills is looking for help. The rich one? That's him. Dakota Blackhorse. Word is he's hiring." Evelyn stopped in her tracks. "Wait, what?" One of the men, surprised by the interruption, looked up. "What? You said Dakota Blackhorse?" "Yeah, he's expanding his ranch. Looks like he needs workers. His land's growing faster than weeds in the rain, but he's a strange one, quieter than a cactus." Evelyn narrowed her eyes, curious. "Does he hire women?" Don't know. Would he take someone broke with an expired high school diploma and an undeniable talent for making cornmeal cake?" The other man laughed, a bit confused. "Ma'am, at this point, he'd probably hire a crow to take care of the horses." Evelyn took 2 steps back, eyes fixed on the horizon, where the hills began to rise at the end of the road. Dakota Blackhorse. Evelyn frowned. She'd heard that name before. A reclusive man, not much of a talker, but with a lot of zeros in the bank. He owned so much land it practically circled the whole county. People said he was mysterious, maybe even dangerous. Some called him a ruthless Apache. Others said he was a war hero who came back with a broken heart and a fortune no one could explain. All Evelyn knew was, if there was work, she needed it. Head held high, pride buried under desperation, she whispered to herself before leaving the square. "Whatever. Doesn't matter who he is. If there's a job, I'm going. And if it's this Dakota guy, well, he better be ready, because this unlucky widow is showing up at his door, and in heels if I have to." And so she went, toward the property of a man she had never seen. The road leading to Dakota Blackhorse's ranch seemed to stretch on forever. Evelyn had been walking for over an hour, with the Arizona sun burning her back and her feet aching inside shoes that had seen better days. Her navy blue dress, the most decent one left in her shrinking wardrobe, was dusty and sticking to her skin. "All right, Evelyn," she murmured to herself, wiping the sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. "You decided to go look for a job with a man who lives at the end of the world. If he turns out to be a serial killer, at least no one will hear your screams. When she finally spotted the property, Evelyn stopped and let out a low whistle. Dakota Blackhorse's ranch wasn't just big. It was impressive. Well-kept fences stretched as far as the eye could see. Purebred horses grazed peacefully, and the main house was a solid wood and stone building that looked like it came out of a magazine. "Well, if he kills me, at least it'll be in a beautiful place," she said, fixing her hair and taking a deep breath. Evelyn walked down the dirt road until she reached the main gate. There was no doorbell, so she clapped her hands a few times, feeling a bit ridiculous. "Hello? Anyone there? I'm Evelyn Carter, and I'm here looking for a job. I promise I'm not selling encyclopedias or representing any church." For a few minutes, only the wind answered. Then she heard footsteps approaching, steady, slow, like someone who's never in a hurry. When Dakota Blackhorse appeared, Evelyn felt like someone had punched the air out of her lungs. The man was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out a white cotton shirt. His black hair was tied back in a low ponytail, and his dark eyes studied her with an intensity that made her feel like an open book. He didn't say a word, he just looked at her. Evelyn cleared her throat, trying to pull herself together. "Hi. You must be Mr. Blackhorse. I'm Evelyn Carter. I heard you're hiring and, well, I really need a job." Dakota crossed his arms, still silent. Evelyn started feeling like she was being judged by a very strict judge. "Look, I know it might seem strange for a woman to show up out of nowhere, but I'm a hard worker, I'm honest, and I make a cornmeal cake that could bring the dead back to life. Not literally, of course. That would be creepy." One corner of Dakota's mouth turned up, just barely. "Come in," he said at last, opening the gate. Evelyn followed him through the property, trying not to look too impressed. The place was run like a Swiss watch. The stables were spotless, the cattle well fed, and there was even a garden that made her own backyard look like a plant graveyard. "Wow, what a beautiful place," she said. "I bet you don't have any cockroaches that refuse to die." Dakota led her up to the front porch of the main house and motioned for her to sit in one of the rocking chairs. He stayed standing, leaning against a wooden post. "Why do you need work?" he asked, straight to the point. Evelyn sighed, deciding honesty was her best bet. "My husband died 2 years ago and left me with more debt than dreams. The bank wants to take my house in 30 days if I don't pay it all off. I've sold everything I could, tried everything, and now I'm here, begging for a chance to clean stables, cook, do laundry, anything." She paused and gave a crooked smile. "I'll even take care of angry animals, plant in dirt drier than anything Moses ever saw, or talk to lonely horses. I'm a great listener, especially when I'm desperate." Dakota watched her for a long moment. There was something in his eyes she couldn't quite read. Maybe sympathy, maybe interest. "Do you have family?" "Just me and my stubbornness." "Oh, and a pig who thinks he's a dog, but he doesn't help with the bills." "No children?" Evelyn felt a sharp pain in her chest. That question always hurt. "No, Harold and we tried, but it never happened. Maybe it's for the best, considering the financial mess he left behind." Dakota nodded slowly, like he was thinking through every word. Then he stepped in front of her, looking her straight in the eye. "You said you'd take any kind of job. Any honest job that doesn't involve wrestling bears. What if I offered something better than cleaning stables?" Evelyn frowned, confused. "Better how? Because honestly, at this point in my life, cleaning stables would feel like hitting the jackpot." Dakota took a deep breath, like he was about to jump off a cliff. "If you need money that badly, I have a better offer." "I'm listening," she said, leaning forward, curious. The silence that followed felt like forever. Dakota looked out toward the horizon, then at his own hands, and finally back at her. "I'll give you half of my land, if you give me a child." Evelyn blinked once, then twice. She was sure she had heard him wrong. "Sorry, could you repeat that? Because I swear I just heard you say something completely crazy." "You heard right." Evelyn stood up so quickly that the rocking chair behind her shook violently. Her face went through at least 3 shades of red before she could get a word out. You just proposed. What exactly?" "A deal," said Dakota, with the same calm tone someone would use to offer sugar for coffee. "Half of my land in exchange for an heir." Evelyn opened and closed her mouth several times, like a fish out of water. You're serious?" Completely. She turned, took 2 steps toward the door, stopped, turned back toward him, and pointed an accusing finger. I walked all the way here under the scorching sun, and this is the kind of crazy proposal you have for me? It's not crazy. It's practical. Practical? You think I'm what, a walking wound with legs? Dakota didn't flinch at her outburst. In fact, he seemed to be expecting exactly this reaction. You need money. I need an heir. It's a solution that benefits us both. Evelyn laughed, but it wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh people let out when they think they're losing their mind. Oh, wonderful, so romantic. What a charming offer. You must be very popular with the ladies in town. I don't usually go into town. I can imagine why, she replied sarcastically. With those social skills, you must be the king of the local dances. Dakota crossed his arms again, looking slightly amused by her outrage. It's a generous offer. Generous? Evelyn put her hands on her hips. Do you even know how much half of this land is worth? I do. That's why I'm offering it. And you think that any woman would agree to something like this? Would you? The question caught her off guard. Evelyn opened her mouth to give an outraged answer, but nothing came out. Because deep down, a small, treacherous part of her mind was doing the math. Half that land was worth more than she had ever dreamed of owning in her entire life. She stammered. Think about it, Dakota said, heading to the door. You have 1 week to decide. 1 week, she nearly shouted. You make me this insane offer and give me a week to decide? It's enough time. Enough time to completely lose my mind, maybe. Dakota stopped at the door and turned to her one last time. The gate will be open if you decide to come back. And then he went inside, leaving Evelyn alone on the porch, with her heart racing, her mind spinning, and the absolute certainty that her life had just gotten even more complicated than she ever thought possible. The walk back home felt even longer than the trip there. Evelyn walked slowly, her feet aching, her thoughts spinning like a top out of control. With each step, Dakota's words echoed in her mind. I'll give you half of my land if you give me a child. That man is crazy, she muttered, kicking a rock in the middle of the road. Who even says something like that? It's like he stepped right out of one of those cheap romance novels the church ladies read in secret. She stopped in the middle of the road and looked up at the sky, as if expecting some divine answer to drop from the endless Arizona blue. Lord, I know life has its cruel little jokes, but this is getting out of hand. First Harold dies and leaves me with more debt than a politician in election year. Now a rich Apache shows up offering me half a kingdom in exchange for 4. She shook her head, unable to finish the sentence out loud. This has to be some kind of cosmic test. Or maybe I hit my head, and now I'm hallucinating. When she finally reached her property, Evelyn stopped at the gate and let out a long sigh. The house looked even more rundown after seeing Dakota's perfect ranch. The peeling paint, the missing roof tiles, the fence that looked more like a crooked smile. Home sweet home, she said to herself dryly, where glamour is optional and poverty is guaranteed. But as she got closer to the front door, she froze. A man in a dark suit was standing there, holding a leather briefcase and checking a pocket watch with the impatience of someone who had more important places to be. Mrs. Carter? He asked, looking up as she approached. That's me, Evelyn answered, already feeling a bad feeling in her gut. And you are? Thomas Mitchell, bank officer. I need to speak with you about your property. Evelyn felt the blood freeze in her veins. A bank officer never showed up at your door to deliver good news. Did Mr. Crowley send me a gift? She asked, trying to keep her tone light, though her voice trembled slightly. Because if it's a fruit basket, I can tell you right now, I'll accept it. Mitchell didn't smile. He opened his briefcase and pulled out some documents. I'm afraid I have to inform you that the timeline for settling your debt has changed. The situation has become more urgent. More urgent how? Evelyn swallowed hard. Because 30 days was already tight. If you want less than that, you'll have to invent some new days of the week. The deadline has been reduced to 2 weeks, Mrs. Carter. Evelyn's legs nearly gave out. She leaned against the doorframe and yielding, feeling like the world had suddenly started spinning faster. Excuse me? 2 weeks, 14 days, starting today. But that's impossible. Mr. Crowley told me 30 days this morning. Mitchell adjusted his glasses with the cold efficiency of someone used to ruining people's days. There's been a reassessment of your default risk. Your situation has been classified as critical. The bank can no longer wait." Evelyn laughed, but it was a borderline hysterical laugh. "Critical? I didn't know poverty came with medical ratings. What's the next stage? Terminal?" "Mrs. Carter, I understand this is difficult, but—" "Difficult," she cut in, raising her voice. "Mr. Mitchell, difficult is opening a jar of pickles without breaking a nail. Impossible is finding $15,000 in 2 weeks when I barely have 15 cents in my pocket. It's actually $15,300, he corrected, checking the paperwork. "Oh, thank you for the precision." Evelyn clapped her hands sarcastically. "That helps so much. Now I know the exact amount of money I don't have." Mitchell sighed and held out the documents to her. "These are the official papers. The auction will take place in 2 weeks at 10 in the morning in the town square." Evelyn looked at the papers like they were poisonous snakes. "And if I don't come up with the money? The property will be sold to cover the debt. Any remaining balance will be returned to you, of course." "Of course," she repeated, bitter, "because everyone knows falling down houses go for sky-high prices." Mitchell closed his briefcase and adjusted his hat. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Carter. It's just business." "Just business," she murmured as she watched him walk away. "To you, it's just business. To me, it's my whole life." Once he disappeared down the road, Evelyn stepped into her house and dropped into a chair in the kitchen. She put her head in her hands and tried to think clearly, but her mind felt like a hurricane. 2 weeks, 14 days, 336 hours to come up with more money than she'd ever seen in her life. "All right, Evelyn," she said to herself, trying to stay focused. "Let's make a list of options." She grabbed a pencil and an old piece of paper and started writing. Option 1, rob a bank. She paused, then crossed it out. Too risky, and I don't have a horse to escape on. Option 2, win the lottery. Another line through it. I'd need to buy a ticket first, and I don't even have money for that. Option 3, find buried treasure in the backyard. Cross that out too. If there were treasure back there, the cockroaches would have found it by now. Option 4, marry a rich man who magically shows up at my door. She stopped writing and stared at the paper. It wasn't exactly a rich man who had magically shown up at her door, but no, Evelyn, she said out loud to herself. Don't even think about it. Dakota's offer is absurd, indecent, impossible, and maybe it was her only chance. She stood up and started pacing around the small kitchen, talking like she was arguing her case in front of an invisible jury. Let's look at the facts, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Fact number 1, I need $15,000 in 2 weeks. Fact number 2, I don't even have $15. Fact number 3, Dakota Blackhorse is offering way more than $15,000. She stopped and looked at the foggy mirror hanging on the wall. But what he's asking in return, that's. She couldn't even say the word out loud. It's a business arrangement, she said finally, trying to convince herself. Like selling a cake or doing laundry. Just more complicated. She began pacing again. And it's not like I'm some innocent maiden. I was married. I know how these things work. And he said he'd give me half of his land. Half? That's a fortune. She stopped again and looked into the mirror. But what kind of woman does that make me? What would people think? What would the pastor say? What would my mother say if she were alive? A knock at the door pulled her out of her thoughts. She opened it, half expecting another bank official with more bad news. But it was only Mrs. Henderson, her nearest neighbor, holding an apple pie. "Hi, dear," said the older woman with a warm smile. "I made too much pie and thought I'd share." "Mrs. Henderson, you're an angel," Evelyn replied, accepting the pie. "Just when I needed something sweet to soften a very bitter day." "Trouble with the bank again?" "Worse. I've got 2 weeks now instead of a month." Mrs. Henderson shook her head sympathetically. "Those bankers have no heart, but you'll figure it out, dear. You always do." After her neighbor left, Evelyn stood at the door holding the pie, gazing toward the horizon where the hills faded into the distance. The next 3 days were the longest of Evelyn's life. She woke up thinking about Dakota's offer, ate lunch with his words replaying in her head, and went to bed with that proposal echoing like a clanging bell. On the morning of the second day, she decided to seek out Father Williams at the church. If anyone could give her a clear-headed opinion on this impossible situation, it would be him. "Father," she said, finding him arranging the altar flowers, "I need spiritual guidance." "Of course, my child. What is it about?" Evelyn hesitated. How could she explain this without sounding completely out of her mind? Let's say, hypothetical. Someone received a business proposal that would solve all of her financial problems, but it involved personal commitments. The priest frowned. What kind of personal commitments? Well, the kind that usually happen between a husband and wife, but not exactly a traditional marriage. Father Williams nearly knocked over the flower vase. "Evelyn Carter, what are you even thinking?" "Desperation, mostly," she answered with raw honesty. "The bank's taking my house in less than 2 weeks, Father. I've tried everything." "Not everything. Did you try asking the congregation for help?" "I did. Yesterday I offered to clean for the church ladies for a whole year in exchange for a loan. Mrs. Patterson said she already has a maid. Mrs. Coleman said she'd pray for me. And Mrs. Foster suggested I sell my pig, because at least then I'd get something useful out of him." The priest sighed. "And your mother's piano?" "It's a beautiful piece. I tried selling it yesterday. Mr. Johnson at the music store said player pianos are out of style and take up too much space. He offered $20 for it. $20 is better than nothing." "Father, I need $15,000. $20 won't even cover the gas to take the piano into town." The priest sat down in the first pew and motioned for her to sit beside him. "My child, sometimes God puts us in difficult situations to test our faith." "Well, then you must think I'm much stronger than I really am," Evelyn replied, "because this test is starting to feel like medieval torture." On the third day, Evelyn decided to make one last attempt. She put on her best dress, brushed her hair carefully, and went to the bank to speak with Mr. Crowley one final time. "Mr. Crowley," she said, sitting across from him with all the dignity she could gather, "I came to make an offer." "Mrs. Carter, we've already discussed this. The deadline is—" "I know the deadline, but hear my proposal first. How about I work for the bank for free for 5 years, cleaning, organizing, making coffee, whatever you need. In return, you restructure my debt." Crowley didn't even look up from his papers. "Impossible. The bank isn't a charity." "Then how about 10 years? Mrs. Carter, please. We have procedures to follow." Evelyn leaned forward over the desk. "Mr. Pratt Crowley, do you have children?" "I do." "Then imagine one of them in my situation. What would you do?" For the first time, Crowley looked her straight in the eyes. "I'd find the money. And if you couldn't—" "There's always a way, Mrs. Carter. There's always a way." As she left the bank, Evelyn literally bumped into Dakota on the main street. She'd been staring at the ground, lost in thought, when she ran straight into his broad chest. "Sorry, I didn't see," she started, then stopped when she recognized him. "Oh, it's you." "It's me," Dakota said, steadying her by the shoulders. "How's the decision coming?" "What decision?" she asked, pretending not to understand. "You know exactly what decision." Evelyn crossed her arms and looked him square in the eyes. "Well, since you asked, I've spent the last 3 days trying every possible alternative so I wouldn't have to even consider your crazy offer." "And how did that go?" "Huge success," she said sarcastically. "The priest told me to have faith, the church ladies offered prayers instead of money, and Mr. Crowley told me there's always a way, without giving me any clue what that way might be." Dakota almost smiled. "So you're here by your own choice." "I'm here because I tripped. Literally. And now I'm stuck in a conversation with a man who makes indecent proposals to desperate women." "It wasn't indecent. It was practical." "Oh, right, my apologies. A perfectly civilized and modern proposal. I bet it's all the rage among the wealthy these days, collecting children like stamps." Dakota studied her for a moment, and Evelyn had the impression he was trying not to laugh. "You don't lower your head even when you're losing, and you don't back off even when you're being mocked." "Then we're alike. We're complete opposites," she corrected him. "You have money, I have debt. You have land, I have leaks. You make impossible offers, I have to accept impossible offers. You don't have to accept anything." "No?" Evelyn gave a bitter laugh. "Then tell me, Mr. Blackhorse, where else is a broke widow going to find $15,000 in 10 days? "I don't know." "Exactly. Neither do I." Dakota went quiet for a moment, watching the street traffic. "Why not just say yes?" Because I still have a little pride, and because your offer is insane. But you're considering it. I'm also considering jumping off a bridge, but that doesn't mean I'll do it. This time Dakota actually smiled, a small but genuine smile. The bridge is on the other side of town. Thanks for the geography lesson, she replied, but she was almost smiling too. They parted ways there, each heading off in a different direction, but something had shifted between them. The hostility had given way to a kind of mutual respect, like two opponents who had recognized each other's strength. 2 days later, Evelyn was back at Dakota's ranch. This time, she hadn't dressed up. She was covered in dust from the road, her hair a mess, her eyes swollen from too much thinking and crying. But there was something different in her posture, a kind of fierce determination that hadn't been there before. Dakota saw her coming from the porch and walked down the steps to meet her halfway. "You came back," he said without surprise. "I did," she confirmed, stopping a few feet away. "But I'm not saying yes yet. I want to hear your terms, all of them. And I want to know the real reason behind this crazy offer." Dakota nodded slowly. "Come in, let's talk." She sat in the chair he offered, folded her hands in her lap, and looked him straight in the eye. "All right, Mr. Blackhorse. I want the truth now. Why does a man like you have to make an offer like this just to have a child?" Dakota poured himself a glass of water and offered one to her. She declined with a gesture. "It's a long story. I've got time. Actually, I've got nothing but time, since in a week I'll probably be living under a bridge." He sat in the chair across from her and was quiet for a moment, like he was deciding where to begin. "My father was Apache. My mother was the daughter of settlers. I grew up between two worlds and never fully belonged to either." "That explains the sunny personality," Evelyn commented dryly. Dakota ignored the sarcasm and kept going. "When I made money from cattle and mining, I bought this land. Legally, documented, paid with my own money. But there are groups that question my right to own it. Because you're Apache? Mostly. They claim the land should belong to real Americans." He made air quotes. "Benjamin Harlow is the leader of that group. He's been trying to push me out for years by any means necessary." Evelyn frowned. "And how does a child fix that? A legal heir born on American soil to an American mother makes the ownership undisputable. It's a legal shield even Harlow can't get past." "I see," she said, processing. "So I'd be like a walking insurance policy. That's not how I see it. No? Then how do you see it?" Dakota looked her straight in the eye. "As a partnership. You need financial security, I need an heir. We both get something out of it." Evelyn leaned forward. "All right, let's hear your conditions. And I want everything clear from the start. I don't want to find out anything ugly later." "First condition," Dakota said, his tone more formal now. "The child will be my legal heir, with full rights to the property." "Fine. Second, you'll have complete freedom to come and go, but you'll need to live here." "This is the legal residence." Evelyn considered that. "Define complete freedom. You can visit town, have guests, do as you wish. You just can't set up residence anywhere else while the agreement is in effect." "And how long is the agreement in effect?" "Until the child turns 18. 18 years? Evelyn stood up. "You expect me to spend the next 18 years of my life stuck here?" "Not stuck, there's a difference. Maybe for you." "What's the third condition?" Dakota hesitated for a moment. "The marriage will be real, official, with signed and registered papers." Evelyn slowly sat back down. "A real marriage?" "Yes, with all the implications that come with it." "Yes." She stayed silent for a long moment, staring down at her hands. "All right, now my conditions," Dakota nodded. "First, I want to be treated with respect. Always. If you mistreat me in front of the staff, people in town, or anyone else, the agreement ends right then and there." Agreed. "Second, I want to have a say in decisions involving the property and the child. I'm not a servant. I'm a partner." Agreed. "Third, I will never be treated like your possession. I can have my own opinions, express how I feel, and disagree with you when I think it's necessary." Agreed. "And fourth," she looked him straight in the eye, "if at any point you decide you want a second wife or a mistress or anything like that, you tell me first so I can leave with dignity." Dakota frowned. "Why would I want that? Rich men always want that sooner or later. It's just a precaution. I won't want that." "How can you be sure?" "Because I'm not that kind of man." Evelyn studied him for a moment, trying to see if he meant it. All right, those are my conditions. Dakota stood and walked to a desk in the corner of the room. He pulled out some papers and a pen. I'll write up the agreement now. Everything in writing, signed and witnessed. While he wrote, Evelyn walked around the room looking at the objects. There were a few books on the shelves, all in English, some on farming and livestock, others on business law. One or two framed photos showed Arizona landscapes. No family pictures, she noted. I don't have a family. Everyone has family. Mine is gone. His tone made it clear she shouldn't ask more. 20 minutes later, Dakota finished writing and handed her the papers. Evelyn read everything twice, checking each clause carefully. Looks fair, she said at last. So we have a deal? Evelyn took a deep breath. This was it, the final decision. She could get up and leave, accept poverty and the loss of her home as the life she'd been dealt. Or she could sign those papers and step into the craziest adventure of her life. We have a deal, she said, picking up the pen. She signed her name in firm handwriting, without hesitation. Dakota did the same. When they finished, he placed one copy in the desk and handed the other to her. There, no business partners. And future spouses, she added, trying to sound casual. And future spouses, he repeated. For a moment, they looked at each other in silence. There was something in Dakota's eyes that Evelyn couldn't quite read. It wasn't triumph or relief. It was something deeper, more complex. Before they could say anything else, urgent knocking at the door broke the moment. Dakota frowned and went to open it. It was Jacob, one of the ranch hands, his face red from running. Boss, I need to talk to you. It's urgent. What is it? Jacob glanced at Evelyn, hesitant. You can speak, Dakota said. She's part of the family now. It's about Mrs. Carter, actually. I just got back from town and found out the bank sold her debt. Evelyn felt the blood drain from her face. Sold it to who? To Benjamin Harlow, ma'am. He owns your debt now. The silence that followed was so heavy it felt solid. Evelyn's legs gave way and she leaned on the table. Harlow, Dakota murmured, his eyes darkening. Does that mean something? Evelyn asked, though his tone already told her it meant a lot. It means our agreement just became a lot more dangerous than I thought. Evelyn just stared at him, afraid. That night, Evelyn woke in the middle of the night to a strange smell in the air. Still half asleep in the guest room Dakota had prepared for her, it took her a few seconds to recognize it. Smoke. She jumped out of bed and ran to the window. What she saw made her blood run cold. The main barn was engulfed in orange flames rising into the sky like desperate fingers trying to claw at the stars. Dakota! She screamed, running from the room in her nightgown barefoot. Fire! The barn's on fire! She stumbled down the stairs, threw open the front door and ran toward the fire. Dakota was already there, along with Jacob and two other workers, forming a desperate bucket line. Get back in the house, Dakota yelled when he saw her coming. It's dangerous. What about the animals? She shouted back, pointing at the barn. There are horses in there. We've let most of them out already. But Evelyn could still hear the desperate whinnies coming from inside the burning structure. Without a second thought, she grabbed a cloth, soaked it at the nearest water pump, and tied it around her face. Evelyn, no. Dakota dropped the buckets and ran after her, but she had already disappeared through the barn's side door. Inside, the heat was unbearable. The thick smoke burned her eyes and made it hard to breathe. Evelyn followed the sound of the panicked animals. She found two horses trapped at the back, locked in their stalls, wild with fear. Easy, sweethearts, she said, coughing, trying to keep her voice calm as she opened the first stall. Auntie Evelyn's getting you out of here. The first horse, a nervous chestnut, reared up when she opened the door. Evelyn threw herself to the side, avoiding the hooves by just a few inches. I know you're scared, honey, but if you trample me, we're both going to end up grilled. She managed to guide the horse to the exit. The second horse, a black mare, was calmer, but still clearly frightened. Evelyn gave her a quick pat on the neck. Come on, girl. Time to get out of this oven. When she finally got out of the barn with the mare, Dakota grabbed her by the shoulders, his face a mix of relief and fury. You're completely out of your mind. You could have died. But I didn't, she said, coughing and wiping her teary eyes. And neither did the horses. Everybody wins. Wins? Dakota looked at her like she'd gone crazy. You're covered in soot, scratched up, and you smell like a chimney. Evelyn looked down and saw he was right. Her hands were black with smoke, her nightgown was torn in places, and a cut on her left arm was bleeding. "Well, at least I match the decor now," she said, pointing toward the still-smoking barn. "Fire survivor chic is in this season." For the first time since they'd met, Dakota laughed. Not a polite smile or a short chuckle, but a full, genuine laugh that echoed across the ranch. "What's so funny?" Evelyn asked, confused but smiling too. "You," he said, shaking his head. "You just risked your life for 2 horses that aren't even yours. You look like you walked out of a fireplace, and you're cracking jokes." "It's my coping mechanism," she explained, wiping more soot from her face. "When life gets too serious, I turn into a comedian. It's that or a nervous breakdown, and breakdowns are way less fun." For the next 2 hours, they worked together to fully put out the fire and assess the damage. The barn was gone, but the animals were safe, and the fire hadn't spread to other buildings. As the sun began to rise, Dakota and Jacob searched through the still smoldering debris. That's when Jacob found something. "Boss, come take a look at this." Dakota walked over, and Jacob pointed to a partially melted glass bottle among the charred wood. Even with all the fire, it still smelled like kerosene. "Someone set this," Dakota said, his voice tight with restrained anger. "Who would do that?" Evelyn asked, walking up after washing and changing clothes. "Not hard to guess," Dakota replied, looking toward the hills. "Someone who wants to see me fail. That Harlow guy? Probably. Or someone working for him." Evelyn crossed her arms, still smelling the smoke in her hair. "Well, then he got what he wanted. The barn's toast. We'll rebuild," Dakota said firmly. Evelyn looked at the 2 men and suddenly had an idea. "What if we don't rebuild the same? What if we build something better?" Dakota looked at her, curious. "Better how?" "Bigger, safer, with a fire system. If we have enemies trying to burn our stuff, we'd better be ready." "Our stuff?" Dakota repeated. "Well, technically, I'm a partner in this business now, right? And if there's one thing I've learned from being poor, it's that sometimes you have to rebuild better than before, just out of sheer stubbornness." Dakota studied her for a moment, and Evelyn saw that same unreadable expression cross his face again. "Do you have any idea how to do that?" "A few. Nothing fancy, but practical. Harold might have left me in debt, but he also taught me a few things about construction." They were discussing rebuild options when Jacob came running from the main house. "Boss, there's a letter on the front door. Someone must have left it during the fire." Dakota took the envelope. No sender, no stamp. Just "to the widow," written in uneven handwriting. "It's for me," Evelyn said, reaching out. She opened the envelope and read the short message in silence. Her face gradually went pale. "What does it say?" Dakota asked. Evelyn handed him the paper. The message was simple and direct. "Leave his life or die." Dakota crumpled the paper in his hand, his knuckles turning white. "This has gone too far." "It was a warning," Evelyn said, trying to keep her voice calm, though her heart was racing. "The question is, from who?" "Doesn't matter who. What matters is that now you're in danger because of me." Evelyn looked at the barn's remains, then at the crumpled letter in Dakota's hand, and finally at the man who had become her husband on paper. "You know what, Dakota?" she said, surprised by how steady her voice was. "I'm already about to lose my house, my financial security, and I nearly turned into barbecue trying to save your horses. If someone thinks an anonymous little note is going to scare me now, they're dead wrong." Dakota looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time since they met, Evelyn saw something like admiration in his eyes. The morning after the fire, Dakota walked into the kitchen with a determined look, one Evelyn was already starting to recognize as trouble. "You need to leave," he said bluntly as she was making coffee. Evelyn froze mid-pour and looked at him like he just suggested she fly to the moon. "Leave and go where, exactly?" "Anywhere. A relative's house, another town. Just far from here." "Oh, of course," she said, stirring the coffee deliberately. "Because I have so many relatives fighting to take me in, and people lining up to offer me work in other towns." "Evelyn, I'm serious. After that letter yesterday." "Dakota," she turned to face him, hands on her hips. "I'm already neck-deep in this mess. I'm not running now like some scared rabbit." "It's not running, it's protecting yourself." "No, it is running. And I've never run from anything in my life. I'm not starting now." Dakota sighed and ran a hand through his hair. "You don't understand the danger." I understand perfectly. She interrupted. Someone burned down your barn, sent me a death threat, and probably has more nasty surprises planned. But I also understand that I'm staying and helping you. Because that's what partners do. Partners? You said it yourself. We're business partners now, and partners don't abandon ship when things get hard. Dakota studied her for a long moment. Why are you doing this? Because she poured the coffee into 2 cups. For the first time in a long while, I feel like I can actually make a difference in something. And honestly, I've already lost everything. I've got nothing left to lose. You have your life? I do. And I intend to use it well. Dakota took the cup she offered and sipped it, thoughtful. If you're staying, you need to know how to defend yourself. Great. What do you suggest? Wrestling classes? Because I've fought with some stubborn chickens before. I've got experience. I'll teach you to shoot and to ride better, and some tracking basics. Evelyn raised her eyebrows. Tracking? I'm going to be a scout now? You're going to be someone who knows when they're being followed. After breakfast, Evelyn announced she needed to return to her old house to grab some clothes and personal items. And my pig, she added. Your what? My pet pig. Winston. He thinks he's a dog, but I haven't been able to convince him otherwise. Dakota looked at her like she was speaking a foreign language. You have a pig who thinks he's a dog. I do. And no, before you ask, he doesn't bark. But he growls at strangers and sniffs everything. Very protective. For the first time since the fire, Dakota smiled. Of course, let's go get your pig, dog. The trip to Evelyn's old home was eye-opening. Dakota watched her gather her few belongings, some clothes, books, the wedding photo with Harold, and a small cloth doll that had belonged to her mother. Winston, the pig in question, greeted Dakota with suspicion, grunting and placing himself between Evelyn and the stranger. Winston, behave? Evelyn said. This is Dakota. Well, it's complicated, but he's on our team now. The pig looked up at her like he completely understood how complicated things were. Back at the ranch, Dakota started Evelyn's training right away. The first archery lessons were a disaster. Aim for the center of the target, Dakota said, standing behind her to correct her stance. I am aiming, Evelyn replied, focused. Then why did the arrow end up in the tree behind the target? Maybe the tree was plotting against me. On her 3rd try, she hit the target, barely. Progress, she cheered. In a few years, I might even hit the center. The riding lessons went slightly better. Evelyn already knew how to ride, but Dakota taught her how to ride faster and safer on rough terrain. It was during one of those lessons that the comical accident happened. Dakota was demonstrating how to take a sharp turn and didn't see the water bucket sitting in the middle of the yard. The horse dodged it, but Dakota didn't. He went flying over the saddle and landed face first in the bucket. Evelyn laughed so hard she almost fell off her own horse. Very graceful, she said, trying to stop laughing as Dakota got up, dripping wet and with his dignity slightly bruised. Accidents happen, he muttered, wringing water out of his hair. Of course, especially when you don't watch where you're going. Should I suggest some bucket avoidance lessons? But it was that evening, sitting on the porch under the moonlight, that the real connection happened. Dakota had been quiet during dinner, lost in thought. What's bothering you? Evelyn finally asked. Dakota was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. I had a family once, he said at last. An Apache wife, Linda, and a son, Thomas. He'd be 7 now. Evelyn felt her heart tighten. What happened? Fever. Took them both the same winter 5 years ago. I'm sorry. Since then, I haven't been able to look at another woman, couldn't even think about starting another family. Evelyn waited, sensing there was more. But now the government's putting pressure on me, saying if I don't have American heirs, the land could be redistributed. Doesn't matter how much money I have, how many legal deals I make. To them, I'm still just an Apache who shouldn't own American land. That's why the proposal, Evelyn said, understanding now. That's why the proposal. I thought it would be simple, practical. But, Dakota looked straight at her. But you're not simple or practical. Evelyn looked at him and said, I need to get some sleep. The next day, Evelyn went into town to get supplies for rebuilding the barn. Dakota had offered to go with her, but she insisted on going alone. I need to show I'm not afraid, she said. Besides, it's broad daylight. What could happen? She found out exactly what could happen on the way back, when 3 masked men jumped out from the bushes along the road. "Hand over the bag, lady," one of them said, pointing a knife at her. "It's just money for nails and boards," Evelyn replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "We want the money," said another, "and for you to stay away from the Apache." "And if I say no?" The man with the knife stepped closer. "You won't say no." That's when the arrows started flying. The first hit the ground right in front of the leader's feet. The second knocked the knife from his hand. The third was clearly a final warning. "Leave," Dakota's voice echoed from the nearby hill. "Now." The 3 men looked around, trying to spot where the arrows had come from, and quickly decided not to take their chances. They ran off. Dakota rode down the hill on his horse, bow still in hand, more arrows ready. "Are you hurt?" he asked, jumping off his horse. "No," Evelyn said, though her legs were shaking. "Did I make it back in one piece?" "How did you know where I was?" "I never stopped knowing where you were," he said, putting the bow away. "Not since yesterday." Evelyn looked at him, her heart still pounding, not just from fear. For the first time since they met, she didn't see Dakota as a stranger who had made her a business offer, but as a man who had risked everything to protect her. "Thank you," she said simply. "Always," he replied. And in that moment, under the Arizona sun, they both knew something had changed between them. Something that had nothing to do with contracts or business arrangements. Back at the ranch, Dakota insisted on checking Evelyn for injuries. She protested that she was fine, but he didn't listen. "Sit down," he said, pointing to a kitchen chair. "Dakota, I'm fine. It was just a scare." "Sit down," he repeated, in that tone that allowed no argument. Evelyn sighed and obeyed. Dakota brought over a bowl of warm water and clean cloths and began examining her hands and arms for cuts or scrapes. "You've got a cut here," he said, gently touching a small wound on her wrist. "Probably from when you pulled back from the knife." "Just a scratch," she said, watching him carefully clean it. "You're better than Dr. Martin from town. At least your hands don't shake and you don't smell like whiskey." Dakota didn't reply to her comment, fully focused on his task. His hands were steady but surprisingly gentle. Evelyn found herself watching his face as he worked, the lines of focus around his eyes, the way he bit lightly on his lower lip when concentrating. "All done," he said, finishing the bandage. "It won't leave a scar." "What a shame," she joked. "I was going to tell everyone it came from an epic fight with outlaws." "You don't need to make up stories to look brave," he said, putting the supplies away. "What you did today already proved that." That night, neither of them could sleep. Evelyn stepped out onto the porch and found Dakota already there, sitting on the steps, staring at the stars. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, sitting beside him. "No, thinking about what happened today, among other things." They sat in silence for a few minutes, looking out at the vast Arizona night sky. The moon was nearly full, casting a soft silver light over the land. "Dakota," Evelyn said finally, turning to look at him. "Can I ask you something?" "You can." "Do you still think this is just a contract?" The question hung in the air between them. Dakota turned to her, and Evelyn saw something shift in his eyes. His guard lowering, the formality fading. Instead of answering with words, he leaned in slowly. He gave her time to pull away, to protest, to remind him of their agreement. But Evelyn did none of that. When Dakota's lips touched hers, it was like something that had been building for weeks finally broke free. The kiss started slow, tentative, as if he was testing whether it was welcome. But when Evelyn didn't pull back, when her hands moved up to gently touch his face, the hesitation disappeared. The kiss deepened, full of all the tension they hadn't spoken about, all the fear from the day, and all the attraction they'd been denying. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. "Evelyn," Dakota murmured, his forehead resting against hers. "I know," she said, understanding what he couldn't say. "I didn't expect it either." He looked at her for a long moment, like he was memorizing her face. "I don't want this to be just a contract," he admitted quietly. "Then don't let it be," she said simply. Later that night, when Evelyn woke in Dakota's room, with early morning light filtering through the curtains, a wave of panic hit her. What had they done? How would this change everything between them? Dakota was sleeping beside her, one arm protectively around her waist. She watched him for a moment, noticing how much younger he looked in sleep, how much softer. Carefully, so as not to wake him, she slipped out of bed and returned to her own room. In the days that followed, both acted as if nothing had happened. Dakota returned to being formal and distant, talking only about practical things like the barn reconstruction and ranch security. Evelyn responded in kind, keeping the conversation strictly professional. But the way they looked at each other when they thought the other wasn't watching told a different story. There was a constant awareness of the other's presence, an electric tension that filled the air whenever they were in the same room. "Are you going into town today?" Dakota asked one morning as they drank coffee in awkward silence. "I am. I need more supplies for the barn," Evelyn said without looking up from her cup. "Jacob can go. I'd rather go myself." After what happened, I need to prove I won't hide," she interrupted, finally looking at him. "Besides, you'll be following me from a distance anyway, won't you?" Dakota didn't deny it. The following weeks settled into a strange rhythm. During the day, they worked side by side rebuilding the ranch, discussing strategy, pretending to be nothing more than business partners fulfilling an agreement. At night, they avoided being alone. Dakota always finding work to do in his office, Evelyn busying herself in the kitchen. But about 3 weeks later, Evelyn started to notice something different. First, it was the unusual fatigue. She, who had always had plenty of energy, now found herself exhausted by the end of the day. Then came the morning nausea, which she first blamed on Dakota's strong coffee. But when she realized she was late, everything clicked. "This can't be," she whispered, counting the days on the kitchen calendar for the third time. "This can't be." But it could, and it probably was. 2 days later, Evelyn quietly made her way to Dr. Martin's office in town. The doctor was old and discreet, known for treating both Apaches and settlers without asking too many questions. "Well, Mrs. Carter," said Dr. Martin after the exam, adjusting his glasses with a warm smile. "Or should I say, Mrs. Blackhorse? Congratulations, you're pregnant. I'd say about a month along." Evelyn froze on the exam table. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. A healthy baby, as far as I can tell. You'll need to start paying more attention to your diet and get plenty of rest." The ride back to the ranch passed in a haze. Evelyn could barely process it. A baby. She was carrying Dakota's child. This wasn't supposed to happen so fast. Their agreement was practical, calculated. It wasn't supposed to involve real feelings, passionate nights, or consequences that came this quickly. When she got home, she found Dakota fixing the pasture fence. He looked up as she approached, and something in her expression must have told him she had news. "Evelyn? What is it?" She stopped a few steps from him, her hands trembling slightly. "I need to tell you something." "What is it?" She took a deep breath, searching for courage. "I'm pregnant." The hammer slipped from Dakota's hand and hit the ground with a dull thud. He stared at her for a long moment, as if unsure he'd heard right. "Pregnant," he repeated slowly. "Yes." For a brief second, Evelyn saw something flicker in his eyes. Real joy, maybe even hope. But almost immediately, his expression shifted back into that formal mask. "Well," he said, picking up the hammer, "that means I'll keep my part of the agreement. That's all you have to say? What else is there to say?" Evelyn felt like she'd just been slapped. After everything they had shared, he still saw this as just business. "Nothing, I guess," she said, turning to walk away. "Evelyn." She stopped but didn't turn back. "I'll take care of you. Like I promised. I know you will," she said, her voice flat. "After all, it's part of the deal." And with that, she went into the house, leaving Dakota alone with his thoughts, and the realization that he had gotten exactly what he wanted, but might have lost something far more valuable in the process. The news of Evelyn's pregnancy spread through Prescott like wildfire. In less than a week, the entire town knew that the widow Carter was expecting a child with the richest Apache in the region. Evelyn found out the hard way, overhearing conversations that stopped abruptly when she walked by, and catching stares that followed her like poisoned arrows every time she went out in public. "Well, Winston," she said to the pig, who was trotting beside her on a makeshift leash during their morning walk across the property, "looks like we're the talk of the town. What an honor." Winston grunted in response, nose pressed to a rock with intense interest. "You're right," Evelyn agreed. Rocks are far more interesting than the people in this town. It was the following Thursday, during a trip to the market, that Evelyn had her first direct run-in with public opinion. Mrs. Patterson, wife of the hardware store owner, was loudly chatting with two other women as Evelyn entered. "Oh, she planned it all," Mrs. Patterson was saying, making no effort to lower her voice. "A desperate widow, a rich man. It's not hard to see how these things happen." "Such a shame," added Mrs. Coleman. "A Christian woman selling herself like that." Evelyn walked up to the counter and smiled politely at Mr. Henderson, the grocer. "Good morning, Mr. Henderson. I need flour, sugar, and maybe some of that coarse salt over there," she said, pointing. "The kind folks you use to keep away nosy old gossips." The three women fell silent. Mr. Henderson tried to hide a smile. "Of course, Mrs. Blackhorse. How much would you like?" "A lot," Evelyn said loudly enough for the entire store to hear. "Apparently, there are way more nosy old gossips in town than I expected." Mrs. Patterson turned red. "Well, I never. Really?" Evelyn turned to her with exaggerated interest. "So you've never done anything questionable for money? How admirable. Must be nice being born rich and never having to make hard choices." "I wasn't born rich, you insolent girl." "Oh, my mistake," Evelyn replied with mock humility. "Then you understand my situation perfectly. Good to know I can count on your Christian compassion." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving the woman speechless. Back at the ranch, Evelyn found Dakota working on the fence near the south pasture. Winston ran to him immediately, grunting cheerfully. The pig had decided Dakota was part of the family. "How was town?" Dakota asked, scratching behind Winston's ears. "Fun," Evelyn said as she unloaded the supplies. "I found out I'm apparently both a calculating opportunist and an innocent victim, depending on who's talking." "And what did you say to that?" "I told them if getting pregnant by an Apache was my master plan to get rich, then they're seriously overestimating my planning skills. I mean, there are way easier ways to make money, like robbing banks or selling miracle elixirs." Dakota almost smiled. "Nothing gets to you, does it?" "Of course things get to me," she said, picking up Winston as he started chewing on her skirt. "Winston, stop eating my clothes. I'm not food." She looked back at Dakota. "But I've learned that if you let people see you're shaken, they just stomp harder." That afternoon, Jacob came running from the barn with troubling news. "Boss, there are 3 men in suits at the gate. Say they're lawyers." Dakota and Evelyn exchanged a glance. Lawyers rarely brought good news. The 3 men stood in front of the main house like vultures circling a carcass. The leader, a tall, thin man with glasses too small for his face, held a leather briefcase. "Mr. Blackhorse," he said. "I'm Chester Mills, attorney representing Mr. Benjamin Harlow. We have some documents to present to you." Dakota crossed his arms. "What kind of documents?" "Documents challenging your legal right to this land," Mills said, opening the case. "We have records showing that part of this property originally belonged to the Harlow family." "Forged documents," Dakota replied without even looking. "They're perfectly legal, sir, registered and notarized." Evelyn stepped forward. "And did these records magically appear after news of my pregnancy spread through town?" Mills adjusted his glasses, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm not sure what you mean." "Of course not," Evelyn said dryly. "Just a coincidence, right? That Mr. Harlow suddenly cares about land ownership now, when Dakota's about to have a legal heir. Mr. Blackhorse's legal matters and personal life are unrelated." "Oh, sure. Just like oil and water, or truth and lies." Dakota placed a hand on Evelyn's shoulder. "You can file your papers in court," he said to the men, "but leave my land." Now, after the men left, Dakota stood quietly, watching the trail where they'd gone. "Harlow's getting desperate," he muttered. "Is that good or bad?" "Bad. Desperate men do dangerous things." As if on cue, Jacob came running again 2 hours later, this time with even more alarming news. "Boss, I was in town and overheard something at the saloon. There's a new guy asking around about you." "What kind of questions?" "Your habits. Where you go, what time you leave home. His name's Coronado, and he doesn't look like the curious type." Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. "A hired gun? Judging by the way he wears his weapon, I'd say yes, ma'am." Dakota was quiet for a long moment. "Jacob, I want you and the other men on guard through the night. 2-hour shifts. No one leaves the ranch alone." "Yes, sir." That night, Evelyn was saying goodnight to Winston in the little pen Dakota had built for him when she heard footsteps behind her. Can't sleep either? She asked, not turning around. No. Dakota stepped up and leaned on the fence. Winston grunted happily and waddled over, expecting attention. At least someone's happy, Evelyn said, petting the pig. Winston doesn't worry about hired guns, lawsuits, or town gossip. Must be nice, living like that. It must. No expectations, no responsibilities, no one trying to kill you over land. They fell quiet, watching Winston sniff through his food for the tastiest bits. Evelyn, Dakota said at last. Yes? I'm sorry about all this. You didn't deserve to get dragged into this mess. Evelyn turned to look at him. Dakota, I walked into this mess with my eyes open. I knew it wasn't going to be easy. But you didn't know it would be dangerous. Maybe not. But now that I'm in it, I'm not going to run at the first sign of trouble. Why? Evelyn paused, searching for the right words. Because for the first time in a long while, I feel like I'm fighting for something that actually matters, even if it's messy, even if it's dangerous. Dakota looked at her for a long moment. And the baby? The baby will be born into a family that doesn't give up easily, Evelyn said, resting a hand gently on her still flat belly. And on land that belongs to us by right. Us, Dakota repeated, like he was testing the weight of the word. Us, she confirmed. For better or worse. And as Winston continued his careful inspection of the feed, both of them knew they'd crossed another line. They weren't just business partners anymore, or even occasional lovers. They were a family. And families protect each other. Evelyn woke in the middle of the night to Winston grunting nervously in his pen and the ranch dogs barking like the world was ending. Still groggy, it took her a few seconds to realize. This wasn't a false alarm. She jumped out of bed and ran to the window. In the darkness, she could see figures moving around the property, like shadows come to life. Dakota, she shouted, running to his room. There are people surrounding the ranch. She found Dakota already up, throwing on his clothes and checking his rifle. How many did you see? I don't know, maybe 6 or 7. They're coming from all sides. Go back to your room and stay away from the windows, he ordered, loading the rifle. Not a chance, Evelyn said, folding her arms. I didn't come all this way to watch from the window while you fight alone. Evelyn, you're pregnant. It's too dangerous. And you think being alone in a room is safer? If they get inside, I'm a sitting duck. Dakota paused, knowing she was right. Then stay close to me, and do exactly what I say. Deal. But first... She ran to the kitchen and came back holding a cast-iron skillet. Dakota stared at her in disbelief. A frying pan? You never know, she said, testing its weight. I've used this beauty to kill 3 rats and a rooster that attacked Winston. It's a proven weapon. Evelyn, what? You've got your arrows, I've got my frying pan. We all have our specialties. The first gunshot shattered the living room window. Dakota pulled Evelyn down behind the couch and fired back, aiming through the broken glass. Coronado, a voice shouted from outside. We know you're in there. Come out and maybe we'll spare the woman. How polite, Evelyn muttered. I always appreciate a well-mannered assassin. Quiet, Dakota whispered. We don't have all night, Black Horse. The voice shouted again. Come out, or we're coming in. You'll have to come in. Dakota yelled back. I don't even go out for the newspaper. Then the real firefight began. Bullets tore through the house, smashing vases, ripping through walls, and making Winston squeal angrily outside. My pig, Evelyn gasped. They're gonna hurt Winston. Winston's probably safer than we are right now, Dakota said, reloading. At least he has a hiding spot. Evelyn crawled over to the ammo box Dakota had left near the fireplace. What do you need? Shells. Blue box. She grabbed a handful and crawled back under another hail of gunfire. Here, she said, handing him the ammo. Evelyn Carter Express Delivery? We bring bullets straight to your gun during life-threatening situations. Are you enjoying this? Dakota asked, incredulous, while he reloaded. I'm terrified, she admitted. But making jokes helps me not pass out from fear. A loud bang at the front door told them the attackers were trying a new tactic. They're trying to break down the door, Evelyn whispered. Jacob and the others should be coming from the barn, Dakota said. We just have to hold on a little longer. Then the back door burst open with a crash. A tall man in a black hat with a scar running down half his face stepped in, guns in both hands. Coronado, I presume, Evelyn said, tightening her grip on the frying pan. The lady has sharp instincts. the gunman said with a cruel smile. Shame she won't live long enough to sharpen them. Dakota rose slowly, rifle aimed at Coronado. Let her go. Your problem is with me. My problem's with whoever Harlow pays me to kill, Coronado replied. And he's paying extra for the widow. Extra, Evelyn said, offended. Should I feel flattered or insulted? Coronado chuckled. You've got guts, ma'am. Too bad guts don't stop bullets. What happened next was so fast, Evelyn could barely remember it clearly later. Coronado swung his pistols toward her. Dakota dove to the side, firing. Evelyn, on instinct, hurled the frying pan with everything she had. The frying pan hit Coronado square in the forehead at the exact moment Dakota's bullet struck his shoulder. The gunman staggered, thrown off more by the shock of the skillet than by the pain. Dakota lunged at him, and the two men tumbled to the floor in a brutal struggle. Coronado was strong, but Dakota knew every inch of that house and used it to his advantage, shoving the man hard against the kitchen table. Surrender, Dakota shouted, finally managing to lock his arm around Coronado's neck and pin him down. All right, Coronado said, dropping his guns. You win. Evelyn scooped up the pistols and pushed them aside, still holding the broken pieces of her skillet. That was my favorite frying pan, she sighed. I'm really gonna miss it. I'll buy you another one, Dakota promised, eyes never leaving Coronado. It won't be the same. That one had a battle history. Dakota tied Coronado to a chair using ropes Evelyn brought in from the barn. Outside, the gunfire had stopped. Apparently, Jacob and the other workers had arrived just in time to drive off the rest of the gang. All right, Dakota said, sitting across from the bound gunman. Who hired you? You already know the answer. I want to hear you say it. Harlow. Benjamin Harlow. Evelyn crossed her arms. And how much is he paying you to kill us? $1,000 per head. 1,000. Evelyn looked genuinely offended. Only 1,000? Dakota, our enemies really don't appreciate our value. What do you think we're worth? Dakota asked, almost smiling. At least 5,000. Each. Coronado stared at them like they were crazy for debating prices while holding him hostage. You two are weirder than I expected. Thank you. Evelyn replied. I'll take that as a compliment. Dakota leaned in closer. How did Harlow know it would be tonight? What do you mean? You came at the perfect time, with the right number of men, and you knew exactly how to surround the property. Someone gave you very detailed information. Coronado hesitated, and something shifted in his expression. You've got a traitor among you, he said finally. The silence that followed was deafening. Evelyn and Dakota looked at each other, the same realization hitting them both. Who? Dakota asked. I don't know the name, but someone here is feeding Harlow information. Someone who knows your routines, your schedule, your plans. Evelyn felt a chill crawl down her spine. If there was a traitor on the ranch, it meant they were never truly safe. Every move they made was being watched. Every plan reported. I lied when I said you'd won, Coronado said, his smile dark. You only won this battle. The war is far from over. Dakota clenched his fists. And who is the traitor? That, Coronado said, you'll have to figure out yourselves, but be careful, he's closer than you think. Evelyn looked out the shattered window at the ranch hands approaching the house. Every familiar face suddenly looked suspicious. The danger hadn't passed. It had just become more dangerous, because now the enemy had a familiar face and intimate access to their lives. The next morning, Dakota took Coronado to town in chains, escorted by Jacob and 2 other men. Sheriff Thompson, a middle-aged man with a graying mustache, received the prisoner with a mix of relief and concern. Hired gun, Dakota explained. He admitted Benjamin Harlow paid him to kill us. That's a serious accusation, Dakota, the sheriff said. You have proof? I've got his confession and 6 witnesses who saw the attack on my property. All right, I'll hold him here while we investigate. Back at the ranch, Evelyn was determined to find out how Harlow had gotten such precise information about their lives. Something was nagging at her, a suspicion she couldn't quite put into words. Dakota, she said, finding him repairing the broken windows, can I go back to my old house? I want to check some papers I left there. You shouldn't go alone. I'll take Winston for protection, she joked. He may not look scary, but he makes plenty of noise when he's nervous. Dakota hesitated, then nodded. Jacob will go with you. Don't take long. Evelyn's small house looked even more run down after weeks of abandonment. She went straight to the cabinet where she kept her important documents, marriage papers, certificates, and the cursed bank promissory notes. "What exactly are you looking for, ma'am?" Jacob asked, standing guard at the door. "Something that shouldn't be here," Evelyn murmured, flipping through the papers. Something that... She stopped. Among the bank documents were papers she didn't recognize. Small alterations, scribbled numbers, dates that didn't match her memory. "This is very strange," she said, comparing two documents side by side. "Jacob, do you know anything about numbers?" "A little, ma'am." "Look at this." She pointed to the promissory notes. "This one says my original debt was $12,000, but this other one, dated later, says $15,300. Jacob frowned. "Maybe it's interest?" "No. The interest is listed separately. Someone changed the principal amount." Evelyn kept examining the documents, growing more and more outraged. There were sloppy erasures, numbers written over other numbers, even a change to the original due date. "That son of a..." She started, then corrected herself. "That disgraceful man. They forged my debt." "Who would do that?" "Only one person had full access to my bank records," Evelyn said, eyes burning with anger. "Mr. Crawley." The ride back to the ranch was silent, Evelyn simmering with fury. When they arrived, she found Dakota in the office, reviewing the ranch accounts. "Dakota, you need to see this," she said, throwing the papers onto his desk. "Mr. Crowley forged my debt." Dakota looked through the documents, his expression growing darker with every page. "This is document fraud, a federal crime. And there's more," Evelyn added, pulling up a chair. "If he forged my documents, he might have forged others, including information he passed to Harlow about you." Dakota leaned back in his chair, taking it all in. "Crowley has access to everyone's accounts in this region. He'd know exactly what our land is worth, our financial habits, our vulnerabilities. And he was the one who kept telling me I'd find a way to get the money," Evelyn said. "Like he knew I'd end up making that deal with you. We need to confront him. We will. But first, I'm going to do something I should have done a long time ago." "What?" Evelyn gave him a smile he was starting to recognize, the kind that meant trouble for someone else. "I'm going to dress like a respectable lady of society, because I want Mr. Crawley to see me coming from a mile away." An hour later, Evelyn walked into the bank in her best dress, the one Dakota had insisted on buying for her the week before, wearing the posture of a woman used to being treated with respect. Dakota walked beside her, equally well-dressed, with a look that left no doubt about his purpose. "Mr. Crowley," Evelyn said, approaching his desk with a smile just a little too sweet to be sincere. "I need some clarification on a few discrepancies in my documents." Crowley looked up from his paperwork and visibly paled at the sight of the couple. "Mrs. Blackhorse, Mr. Blackhorse, what can I do for you?" Evelyn calmly spread the papers across his desk. "Can you explain how my original $12,000 debt magically became $15,300? Well, there must be some mistake." "A mistake?" Dakota leaned over the desk. "Or deliberate fraud?" "I don't know what you're talking about." Crowley stammered, but his hands trembled as he sifted through the papers. "Mr. Crowley," Evelyn said, her voice still sweet, but now with steel underneath. "I may be poor, but I'm not stupid. And I may not have formal education, but I can count. And," added Dakota, "we also have documents proving that you passed confidential information to Benjamin Harlow, details about our finances, our schedules, our plans." Crowley started to sweat. "These are very serious accusations." "Oh, they are," Evelyn said cheerfully. "Almost as serious as forging bank documents and conspiring to steal land from innocent people." I never." "Mr. Crowley." Dakota placed his hands firmly on the desk and leaned in. "You're going to cancel the sale of my wife's debt to Harlow. You're going to restore the original $12,000 amount, and you're going to tell us exactly what information you gave him." "I can't. The bank has policies." "The bank also has policies against forgery," Evelyn pointed out. "And I imagine the sheriff would be very interested in these documents." There was a long silence. Finally, Crowley sighed and slumped in defeat. "Harlow offered me $5,000, he admitted. Said it was just for general business information." $5,000, Evelyn repeated. "Well, now I am flattered. First, 1,000 for my head, now 5,000 for information about me. I must be rising in value." "What did you tell him?" Dakota asked. "Your usual times going to town." how many workers you had, the layout of the ranch you mentioned when applying for the reconstruction loan. The layout that made last night's attack possible. Crowley seemed to shrink in his chair. I didn't know he was going to use it for that. I thought it was just business. Mr. Crowley, Evelyn said, leaning over the desk, either you fix this mess right now, or I walk straight out of here to the sheriff, then to the local paper, and then I'll make sure every church lady in town hears about it. And considering half this bank's clients are church ladies, I imagine that would be very bad for business. All right, Crowley said quickly. I'll cancel the sale. I'll restore the original amounts. Just please don't get the authorities involved. We haven't decided about that yet, Dakota said. But it's a start. 2 hours later, Evelyn walked out of the bank holding corrected paperwork and a canceled debt. For the first time in months, she truly felt victorious. We did it, she said, almost not believing it. We really did it. You did it, Dakota corrected. It was your suspicion that uncovered all this. No, Evelyn shook her head. We did it together. That evening, after a peaceful dinner, with no outlaws or legal threats looming, Dakota found Evelyn sitting by the fire, gently petting Winston, who had decided her lap was his favorite place in the world. Evelyn, he said, sitting down beside her. I have something to ask you. She looked at him and noticed something different in his expression, something softer, more open than she was used to seeing. What is it? Dakota took a deep breath, as if preparing to jump off a cliff. Marry me, Evelyn blinked. We are married, remember? Paper signed, deal made, baby on the way. No, he shook his head. Marry me for real, not for an agreement, not out of necessity, by choice. Evelyn's heart leapt in her chest. She looked at his face, and for the first time, truly saw the man behind all the defenses and formality. Dakota, I know we started this all wrong, he said, taking her hand. I know it's been complicated and messy, but somewhere along the way, this became real for me. You became real to me. Evelyn felt tears sting her eyes. I thought it was already real, she said, squeezing his hand. It was? It was? She smiled through the tears. We were just waiting for our hearts to catch up. And when Dakota kissed her there, by the fire, with Winston grunting his approval between them, Evelyn knew she had finally found her place in the world. It wasn't just the ranch, or financial security, or even love. It was family. The true kind they had built together, against all odds. 6 months later, the Black Horse Ranch had become a sight to behold. The new barn didn't just replace the old one, it exceeded it in every way. Larger, safer, and fitted with an irrigation system that made the neighbors jealous. Evelyn had insisted on incorporating traditional Apache details into the modern architecture, creating a unique blend of cultures in harmony. See that fence there? She said to Dr. Martin, who had come for his monthly visit to check on her pregnancy. Dakota said that geometric pattern was impossible. Took me 3 weeks to prove him wrong. And how are you feeling, my dear? The doctor asked, putting away his stethoscope. Like a very happy whale, Evelyn replied, rubbing her round belly. This little girl seems to have inherited her father's stubbornness. She spends all night doing acrobatics in there. A girl? I'm sure of it. No boy would cause this much trouble before he's even born. Winston, who had grown significantly and now weighed nearly 50 kilos, lay at her feet like a giant dog. The pig had become a local legend. Folks from town would sometimes stop by just to see the dog pig of the Black Horses. It was on a warm September morning that the contractions started. Evelyn was in the kitchen, trying to convince Winston to stop stealing carrots from the vegetable basket. Winston, for heaven's sake, she said, holding a carrot above her head, you're not a rabbit, and even if you were, you're already too fat. That's when the first contraction hit her. Strong, sudden, she had to brace herself on the kitchen table. Dakota, she shouted. I think it's time. Dakota came running from the parlor, saw her expression, and immediately panicked. What do I do? Where do we go? Do I need to get the doctor? Hot water? Why do they always say hot water? Dakota, Evelyn said, breathing deeply through another contraction. Breathe. One of us has to stay calm, and clearly it won't be me. The labor lasted 8 hours. 8 hours during which Dakota paced the room like a caged animal. Jacob tried and failed to keep him company. And Winston stood guard at the bedroom door, grunting quietly every time Evelyn groaned. At least the pig is calmer than you, Jacob observed. The pig isn't waiting on his firstborn, Dakota shot back. Technically, neither are you, Jacob pointed out. Evelyn is the one giving birth. Dakota gave him a look that made Jacob decide it was best to stay quiet. Finally, just as the sun began to set, a strong, indignant cry echoed from the bedroom. Dr. Martin stepped out a few minutes later with a wide smile. Congratulations, Dakota. You have a beautiful, healthy baby girl. A daughter, Dakota repeated as if testing how the word sounded. And Evelyn wants to see you. Dakota walked into the room and found Evelyn exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle that looked like it contained the most precious thing in the world. Come meet your daughter, she said, smiling. Dakota approached hesitantly and looked down at the small, red face. The baby had his slightly almond-shaped eyes but Evelyn's small, upturned nose. She began, but his voice cracked. Beautiful? Perfect? Future terror of this ranch, Evelyn offered. All of the above, he said, gently touching one of the tiny hands. What should we name her? How about Hope? Dakota suggested. Because that's what you gave me. Hope. Hope Blackhorse. Evelyn tested. I like it. It's strong. In the weeks that followed, word of Dakota's daughter spread through town. But this time, the reaction was different. The respect the couple had earned through their struggles had shifted public opinion. Have you heard about the Blackhorse baby? Mrs. Patterson gossiped at the market. I heard she's absolutely precious, Mrs. Coleman replied. And after everything they've been through, they deserve that happiness. Who would have thought the unlucky widow would become one of the luckiest women in the territory? Noted Mrs. Foster. Evelyn overheard that remark during a trip to town and couldn't help but laugh. Lucky? She said to Mr. Henderson, the shopkeeper. Mr. Henderson, if surviving arson, gunmen, and a husband who panics at the word labor is luck, then yes, I'm truly blessed. 3 months after Hope's birth, Dakota surprised Evelyn with an announcement. I want to renew our vows, he said one morning over coffee. Renew? We just got married not long ago. No, we made a business deal not long ago. I want a real wedding, with guests, with you in a white dress, and no contracts involved. Evelyn looked at him over her coffee cup, trying not to smile. Dakota Blackhorse, are you proposing again? I am. Even though I'm stubborn, opinionated, and have a pet pig that weighs more than some horses? Especially because of that. Then I accept, she said, on one condition. What is it? Winston gets to be our ring bearer. The ceremony took place on a Sunday in December, under a sunset that painted the Arizona sky in shades of gold and red. The ranch was decorated with wildflowers and colorful ribbons. Guests came from all over, some out of curiosity, others out of genuine affection for the couple. Evelyn wore a simple but elegant white dress and carried Hope in her arms during the ceremony. Dakota stood beside her, more nervous than he'd been in any gunfight. Dakota Blackhorse, said Father Williams. Do you take Evelyn as your wife, to love and protect her in wealth and poverty, in sickness and in health? I do. Evelyn Carter Blackhorse, do you take Dakota as your husband, to love and support him in joy and sorrow, through good times and bad? I do, she said, looking straight into Dakota's eyes. And I promise to try not to criticize your cooking skills too often. Laughter from the crowd broke the solemn moment, and even Dakota smiled. When it was time for personal vows, Dakota took a deep breath. Evelyn, you didn't just give me a daughter. You gave me hope. You gave me a family. You gave me a reason to build something that will last for generations. And you, she replied, her voice thick with emotion, you gave me a home. Not just this land, but a place I belong. A place where I can be myself, with all my quirks and my stubborn pig. When the priest declared them husband and wife again, the celebration that followed lasted late into the night. Children ran between the tables, music filled the air, and even Winston joined in, wearing a bow tie that Evelyn had insisted he wear. He's better dressed than half the guests? Dakota said, watching the pig greet visitors with polite little grunts. Winston always had class, Evelyn defended. He just didn't like to show it. Later, after the last guests had gone and Hope was peacefully asleep in her crib, Evelyn sat on the porch with Dakota. The land stretched out in front of them, bathed in the light of the full moon. We did it, she said simply. Did what? Everything. The ranch is thriving. We have a healthy daughter. The town respects us. Even Harlow gave up after Coronado went to jail. And most importantly, Dakota said, pulling her close. We have each other. Evelyn looked out at the land that was now truly hers, not because of a contract or a deal, but because of love and hard work. She looked at the man beside her, who had once been a stranger with an impossible offer and had become her partner in everything. You know, she said, leaning on his shoulder, when you made that crazy proposal, I thought you were desperate. I was, and I thought it was the worst idea in the world. It was. But sometimes, she smiled, the worst ideas turn out to be the best decisions. And there, under the Arizona stars, with their daughter asleep inside and Winston snoring happily in his pen, Evelyn knew she had found exactly what she didn't even know she was looking for. A family, a home, and a love that had grown from the most unlikely circumstances into the truest, most real thing in her life. What did you think of Evelyn and Dakota's story? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What's your score? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell to hear all our stories. And check out more touching stories by clicking right here on the screen.